I'm going to be sharing like spiritual information that I was studying. This is like, could be up to 5 years ago, including merkaveh Kabbalah, which is, as far as I know, from Yecheskel, or Ezekiel the prophet. So here's a quote I'm reading. As it often happens with those who strive for something to which they are not entitled, we lose that which we possess. In other words, we're not entitled to anything. I don't know where I got that quote. Another thing is that arriving through the eye of the needle without baggage is like another way of saying that everything that we have, everything that's ours, is not really a belonging. Our sense of belonging is ourself. That's the spirit. When we fail to show gratitude to God for the wisdom of whatever it is, it perishes in dishonor. Let not the wise man glory in his wisdom. I really don't know where I got these quotes. You'll have to Google them. I got better for sure about writing them, but about writing where I got them. But I'm going to say I think this is all from merkaveh Kabbalah, from Ezekiel, and interpreters. So, as said, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, because when one fails to show gratitude to God for one's wisdom, there's no honor there. So Bilam and Balak is a blind transgression. Bilam was like a sorcerer, blesser, curser kind of character. King Balak hired him to curse the Jews. It didn't work. He could only bless them. He almost died. His donkey saved him when the donkey saw the angel. And blind transgression is unconscious actions against the divine. And the divine is within all. So that's when we're able to give the example that Bilam told him, you're going to have to get them to sin sexually and then eventually in other ways, once they do that, because God doesn't let me curse them. You have to make them curse themselves, kind of. So anyway, they were enticed by sexual immorality, food sacrificed to idols. It resulted in a deadly plague. It killed over 20,000, I think it was 24,000 of the tribe of Shimon specifically, who had a large sexual appetite. And then Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey is like the tetragrammaton, and it's derived from the consonantal root Haya, Hey Yud Hey, which is to become, to be, to become, and come to pass. The isness is it was, it will be, and it is. So God explains his tetragrammaton name as Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am that I am, or I will be what I will be, or I was what I was. Is not exactly, but same idea. Beingness. The highest heaven contains 7 palaces, which are called Hechalot, and in the innermost palace resides a supreme divine image of God's glory seated on a throne, surrounded awesomely by hosts who sing God's praise. However, to ascend to it, we need to descend. In other words, descenders of the chariot, which is also called the inward contemplation. We have to descend into ourselves in order to ascend up. To let go is to get into that realm. And there's also 7 stages of mystical ascent to the celestial realms, which we might say is like the 7 heavens and 7 throne rooms. It's a dangerous journey. The adept must not only make elaborate purification preparations, but also need to know the proper incantations, which is the verses we say, the seals, the angelic names needed to pass fierce angel guards, and plus to navigate forces at work outside and inside the palaces. Something like reciting secret names of God is how people who are worthy, I mean, you and I, for example, whoever you and I are, this is obviously relevant to whoever watches it, but we have our ways of going inward, and maybe it's, the spiritual work or the spiritual abilities take tremendous effort, and as it said, it's dangerous. We need elaborate purification preparation and proper. It could be very fierce. So even hymns like singing. And this is his great name with which Moshe divided the great sea. This is his great name which turned waters into high walls. Right? That's by the sea. That's how God speaks of itself. God speaks of God's self. So heavenly music and mantras can encourage a further ascent. Now in Judaism we call it psukim, or verses. And goals can include visionary glimpse of God. Behold the King in his beauty. Now we're not saying we're going to actually see God, because we learned that you can't see God's face and live. And that's the words that's used. in an external way. It's so, face is external. So number 2, there's an acceptance into the angelic retinue of God with honored seat, enthronement. So that's like to be among the angels is really to be part of the masterful energy and be able to praise God, be able to see God's glory no matter what our ego or temporary desires want. And then there's a successful pilgrimage to sitting on God's lap, not anthropomorphizing God as a person with a lap, but the feeling of being in God's lap. And for the sexual attenuation or the erotic sacred, I just, have to point out that in the Zohar, for example, Kabbalah, it's taught about the Friday night Shabbat, that, the Sabbath, how the holiness in terms of the sacred, that's the time, for example, to reproduce, to copulate, to sexually bond in such a way that could bring a soul into the world. So this is the very high producing creativity. Like that's where babies' whole worlds come from. And there's a polarity here, which is one side measurement of the body is a detailed description of the Creator as seen by the descenders at the climax of their ascent, versus the other side maintaining that God's incorporeality is repulsed by limiting God. God is not in a body. So we can't say that we could detail or describe God in these ways that I explained before, some of the goals people could have. We're not saying these are our right goals. We're saying these are the goals that people kind of can go for. And the latter prophets, there was the major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, and the minor prophets, which were Hosea, Joel, Amos, Avadia, Yonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. A seraph, so the prophets are direct communicators from God. The seraph is the angel or divine messenger. It's called the burning one. And they're celestial beings with a fiery passion for doing God's good work. Also could be dragons, serpents, alternatively, and described as fiery, flying elements of sun and continual burning up in self-nullification. The sublime journey to God is the ability to draw down to earth the divine powers, to be, as we learn in Torah, to be a dwelling place for God. To descend into ourselves, to ascend enough, and then God meets us. We can summon and control great angels to learn the holy truth. In other words, when we are acting above our own nature, we're on the level of the angels, they serve us. Two thrones hinted at by Kabbalists is the visionaries and the prophets. So let's say it in a different way, God as masculine and feminine, to some, we learn in Torah as Kabbalah, is the Shekhinah, which is the presence, and the countenance, the visualize, the appearance. And they merge, but that's where we find ourselves is in between. So Atzilus, or the world of emanation from the light, is all prophets come from there. It's the highest world. But they have to be perceived through lower worlds, which is Bria, which is creation, Yetzirah, formation, Asiya, action. Yetzirah is the divine emotion, Atzilus is the divine wisdom, and Bria is the divine understanding. And I'm going to stop here. This is very important for me to say that Kabbalah that I'm sharing from there is not the Zoharic Kabbalah. It's called merkaveh Kabbalah. And I will also say that for most of us, it might be tempting to take something literally, but you really have to let it live in you. Kabbalah means to receive. You have to be able to receive this information. It can transform us on the inside. We don't know into what and how, but to be able to be a receiver is called to be a Kabbalist, to be a visionary, to be a prophet even. So, I hope that this was meaningful. Wish you well. Good night.